Okay, that's my cue to to quieten down.
Food is a weapon. When you sell real weapons, you control armies. When you control food, you control society. But when you control seed, you control life on Earth. Industrial farming is the single biggest destructive force on the planet today. The war against the Earth begins in the minds of men. And I mean men.
Vandana Shiva is one of the most prominent activists in the world.
Oh my God, he's a hero.
This is Vandana Shiva. I'm Van as a part of Vandana.
She's a warrior to the patriarchal system that destroys.
Vandana was one of the pioneers who started the global seed movement.
Owning intellectual property right on seed is a pathetic attempt at seed dictatorship. We started to fight GMOs through growing seeds and saving seeds.
She does knowingly make statements which are clearly inaccurate and incorrect.
Demonizes modern agriculture.
The organic elite.
Anyone who's going to stand up to big corporations is going to come under attack.
40% of the solution to climate change lies in organic, ecological farming in the hands of small farmers.
Today, one of the big movements is around regenerative agriculture.
We have the power, we will change, and we will be the change we want to see, and no one is going to stop us.
Vandana Shiva is Monsanto's worst nightmare.
We will not be stopped. We have a duty to save seeds. Little old lady from India. Oh, why does she drive you nuts?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final Q&A of the New Vision for Earth Film Festival after a series of incredible films and amazing conversations with the people involved in them. Today is no exception, and we have the opportunity to sit down with Camilla Becket, the co-director and co-producer of the feature film, The Seeds of Vandana Shiva. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that the film is available until tomorrow on the film festival platform, and then again on the 11th and 12th of October during the conference GLF Nairobi 2023, A New Vision for Earth. And we'll also be sharing the link to the film in the chat. So without further ado, welcome, Camilla. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Eden. It's good to meet you.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed the film to begin with, and I'm really excited to get a little bit more insight about the story behind the film and what went into the making of it. So to begin with, let's start with maybe you could just tell us a bit about why this story, what drew you to this story, and why did you choose to follow the story of Vandana Shiva?
Well, I grew up in a sort of a semi-rural farming community, so I've always had a little bit of a foot in that world. I mean, it's a very long and circuitous story, but to keep it short, we worked on a series of films that were put together by the patriarch of the Orthodox Church based in Istanbul, actually. He's known as the Green Patriarch, and he invited us to film a series of symposia, films around these symposia, which were about ecologically threatened water bodies around the world. So we traveled with him over a few years, and he invited scientists, journalists, environmentalists, policymakers, just a whole sort of hodgepodge of stakeholders to these symposia, and they would talk about what could be done and how they could disseminate learnings through religious and spiritual networks to create behavior change, basically, from their constituents. And he invited Vandana Shiva on these symposia. And so we met her several times, and we were always just, you know, so impressed with her, her presence, her charisma, her message. And so when those symposia came to a close, we thought, let's do a story about food and farming and the impact on the environment and the climate, because it's an area that hadn't yet really been explored to the extent that it needs to be. And what better voice to articulate the issues than Vandana Shiva herself. So that's how we got started. We asked her if we could follow her around for a while, and we were lucky enough that she agreed. We built up some trust at that point, and so the rest is history. We made the film. Yeah.
Amazing. Just actually a quick practical question. What kind of period of time did you shoot the film?
Good question. And I don't know how many small documentary filmmakers you've spoken to, but it always takes a lot longer than you think it's going to. So actual filming, what we would do, well, in fact, it actually took 8 years from soup to nuts. That's how long it took for us to have the concept. We had to travel to India, and all over the world actually, and raise money in between, and script and archives and all of that stuff. So it actually took a really long time to between start and finish, and we finished it in 2021. Yep.
Amazing. Yeah, I thought these things might be quite a long process. The story itself, the film itself, obviously covers a much longer period of time than that. It follows the life of Vandana Shiva, and at the same time, it weaves in a lot of the larger global issues that she has been personally involved with, and a lot of the issues we're facing today. How did you tie all of this together, and how did you choose what to include and how to frame those different challenges or different problems that Vandana Shiva faced?
Well, we follow, you know, she is one of those incredibly dedicated, focused people, and she became aware of ecological issues actually as quite a young person, as she was a sort of a science prodigy actually in India, and she started studying nuclear physics. This is in the film, and became aware of the impacts of the atom bomb, basically, and sort of atomics. And so when we got to know her, we started to learn about her evolution as a scientist, as an environmentalist, and an activist. And as she learned the sort of building blocks about how the situation has been put together in, specifically from our perspective and the film's perspective, food and farming, where this has all come from the Industrial Revolution, basically, as we have evolved into the system where we've got an industrial system that is having huge impacts on the environment, the climate, on democracy, on sort of everything that underpins a thriving society. And this is all having a negative impact. But we chose her life story because she had to learn all of this stuff. And so as she learned all of this stuff, as somebody who has just got this very investigative brain, plus she's also a quantum physicist, so she's really good at sort of connecting dots and putting things together. We thought it was just a great sort of tool for telling the story of industrial agriculture with the alternative story of organic, regenerative, ecological agriculture, where we are now, where we should be and can be, based on how she learned and how this sort of very strong, charismatic person learned about the issues, and she just tells them to us through the course of her learning in the film and her growth.
Really interesting to hear that Vandana Shiva in the film is almost like a window for us to see kind of these broader issues. And it's interesting to hear you talk about like her perspective and your perspective as a filmmaker. Is there an overlap between those perspectives with this film specifically, or perhaps with your other work? Like, where do you as a filmmaker or creating a film, like what perspective do you take, and do you find that shifts as you spend time with a subject?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, a human story is always the best window into issues. Otherwise, they can be dry and feel like homework, right? We relate to each other through our own human stories. You know, storytelling is how we learn, really, and change. And so, you know, in the film, for those who haven't seen it, it's really Vandana tells us her story. We had a series of interviews of many years, and she just told us about her life, and her life itself is really interesting and dramatic, especially as she sort of evolves as a scientist, as an environmentalist, as an activist, as a feminist, as a human being. And so, as you said, her life is a window into the issues. But even though she tells the story, we as filmmakers are bearing witness to her telling of the story. And of course, we're the ones who end up picking the pieces out of 8 years of film. It wasn't 8 years of filming, but it was a lot, you know. We are the ones who choose how to put it together. So it's really, you know, the audience is, in a sense, is watching us, watching her, you know. So there's almost 3 windows into the issues, because we didn't really direct her. I mean, we just really observed her and asked her questions. So it's very symbiotic in a way. I mean, she told us what she remembered of her life, and we made the choices what to put in and what to leave out. So it's a bit of both, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the classic thing with, I think, like photojournalism, where it's like, it's as much as you have to remember photographers choosing what to frame and what to cut out at the end of the day.
Of course, because we're storytellers, and even a picture, every picture tells the story. And so even in the editing bay, you're always making we make a choice about the story we want to tell, obviously. And so how do we tell it? We tell it visually, we tell it through narrative, we tell it through music, we tell it through all the tools that we have available to us as filmmakers. And so, but at the end of the day, in this particular film, we have this one person that we are showing, she's the one who's front and center. And of course, all the people around her, there's a lot of other people in the film, but the film is primarily about her. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. We've talked, I guess, about what it's like to be an observer, like a filmmaker, in that environment. But what was the personal experience like in creating that film, of spending time with Vandana Shiva, of exploring these issues? Like, did you find a shift in your own perspective?
In terms of, obviously, I learned an enormous amount about the issues, about industrial farming, about ecological farming, about indigenous farming, about seed saving and how seeds work, and the hybrid seeds and the GMO seeds and the organic seeds, and all of those kind of the sort of more sciencey, technically very important things that are not that difficult to know once you understand them. And it would be, I think it's possible for us all to understand these issues. And I hope that the film clarifies the issues in a very relatable way. But from a personal perspective, it was just great to be in India and to be around seed savers and traditional food producers, and organic cotton growers, people who make khadi cotton, the traditional way of making clothes in India. All of these kind of things were really quite profound experiences for me. But most importantly was really to be around a person who is has a world, is almost a sort of a global leader, especially in the environmental space, and to get to know not only the humanity of that person who gets tired and cranky and needs her coffee, and just things like, the real humanity of people who we put on pedestals sometimes. There was a part of me that was like, let's not put these people on pedestals, because we need to actually nurture them as just normal human beings, and respect them as normal human beings, but at the same time also really understanding what it takes to be a leader of that caliber, the energy, the confidence in self, the clarity of thought, the dedication, the commitment, all of those kind of things that really make change makers a little bit different from the rest of us, I think. And particularly with Vandana, she is just so incredibly reliable. I mean, I have traveled with her where she's been sick and exhausted and everybody else is falling like flies, and Vandana will get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be somewhere on a plane at 6 in the morning to fly, somewhere to work with an indigenous group that is really under threat. And she will show up, be loud, be clear, be supportive, spend time with them in the evening, go and sleep for another 2 hours, and then she's off doing the next thing. Her energy is just incredible. And her dedication really incredible too. So those are the kind of things I learned about leadership.
Amazing. I think that energy and dedication is really quite inspirational. I think it really shone through in the film as well. Like, as we followed her, yeah, as we followed her on her journey, just the pace of it all really reflected for me kind of how much energy it would take to put yourself in a role like that.
Right. And there's sacrifices. If you want to change the world, there are really some sacrifices, of time, of other things to do. So you have to be that kind of personality too, that you're fed by your activism and you feel it's so important. And thank God we have people like that in the world, because, they bring the rest of us along, and, they do change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I move on to my next question, I'm just going to say a reminder to the audience that if anybody else has any questions, so they're not all coming from me, just drop them into the chat, and I'm sure Camilla will be happy to answer those. But coming back to the film, it was released in 2021, as you mentioned. What has the response been, or what's the impact been so far? And are there any stories from screenings or anything that really stand out for you?
We released it literally, as we all went into lockdown. So in a way, that was a sort of I mean, in some ways that wasn't so terrible, because a lot of film festivals went online. And so we were able to, so many more people saw it in film festival. It was in a lot of film festivals, which is fantastic. So more people were able to see it through the film festival circuit than normally, because I think, here's a film festival that's digital. Everything used to be in place. It's changed dramatically, the whole sort of distribution model. And that's good, I think, for films. But it was in the Sydney Film Festival, just as we came out of lockdown. The Sydney Film Festival went back in place, and I was able to attend. And it was, it was so wonderful to be in a packed theater with people just really enjoying the film. And I'm sure many filmmakers have told you that you sit, but we have 3 people in our team. It's a very small little production company. You're beavering around for years in front of your little laptop, and you don't really realize that, oh, we forgot we're making this for other people to see. And then when they see it and they appreciate it, it just makes all the struggles really worth it. And so so the feedback has been fantastic. We've, humble bragging, but we have won a lot of awards. And so I really, we've had some good reviews. And I think the distributors say that more people have requested community screenings for this film than, the rest of their catalog. And so all of that has been, bottom line, it's been great.
Amazing. Congratulations, and all well deserved, I'm sure.
Well, it was a team effort, and we had Vandana, so yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that like the distributor said there was a lot of community screenings. Are there any communities that you found the film resonating more with, whether that be like activist communities or farming communities or anything?
The activist communities, very much. We had a lot of seed saving, organic farming. So the people you would expect to have interest in the issues. And of course, people have known, she has a huge fan base, Vandana, already across the globe. I mean, she, the regenerative, ecological food and farming, organic farming space it's growing. And the movement towards ecological food and farming is just growing immensely. Because the writing is on the wall about how food is being impacted and how we're destroying soils. And, I probably don't need to tell you all of that stuff. But the thing is about organic and regenerative farming is that it offers real solutions for local communities to have food security, food sovereignty, and to be able to feed themselves. And so, so there are people who've been working in this space for a long time. Vandana is not the only person, of course. She is the sort of the icon of the modern seed saving movement, and she is a global leader. Anyway, she's very well loved in the organic and regenerative food space, and so there was a lot of people who were already interested in the film, and they've all everybody always wanted to know more about her, because she's been around for 40 years actually doing this work and has pioneered a lot of it. So. So mainly that, but also all over the planet. I mean, from sort of, islands in the Caribbean, obviously India, Japan, China, everywhere. We've had requests from all over the planet to see the film.
Amazing. I think it's very timely as well. You talked about, the regenerative agriculture, of course, but that has been more and more visible in the last couple of years, especially in the UK where I'm based, and in the United States as well. I think there seems to be a lot stronger movement now, or at least a lot more visible movement, which
yes.
Of course this film is as part of that visibility. In your other work in communications and a filmmaker, you've worked on a variety of other stories, also focused on the environment and social justice. What have you learned through telling these stories and finding those angles? What have been some of the challenges and some of the rewards of working in that space?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, I think always to tell the story through human stories, because we can, we relate to other, there's a reason why we've been telling stories orally, and now, through film, through digital, through AI, that's a whole nother world. But telling stories about other people that you can relate to, I think always are a way in, for me anyway, to get issues across rather than a sort of a school textbook. And so so that's what we've always prioritized, to find people to tell the story. I think that, as anybody who works in the environmental space has to be a little brave and a little bit resilient, because, change is not happening fast enough. And so just to keep your courage up and keep going, and know that we are making a difference in our own ways, and are helping to move the needle, even though it feels like we're not moving the needle fast enough. I think if you really care about the environment and the climate and, you know, people around the world, the biosphere, then you just keep going. But sometimes it can be challenging because we've got an onslaught of fires, floods. You know, Jim, my partner, was in Volos, which is in Greece. He's in Greece at the moment, and he got trapped in Volos because of all the flooding, you know. So, you know, we're not unaffected. We're all being infected by climate change right now. And so it can get a little bit depressing to know that things aren't changing fast enough, but we keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some good advice for aspiring filmmakers in that space, for sure, as well.
And actually, the regenerative movement is, I think, a case in point where there has been a lot of change. You know, I remember Vandana talking about regeneration in, you know, 28. Nobody was talking about it, and now I think it's become a household word. There are more and more and more people joining the movement. So, you know, that's really gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Just coming back to the film, more specifically, I see that we're coming close to time, but there was just, I wanted to touch on a couple of the main themes that I kind of saw in the film. I think that you mentioned there about Vandana Shiva's ecofeminism, and I think the idea of patriarchy and how it ties into the agricultural systems was very prominent in the film, and was talked about by some of the kind of the key players, the key characters, if you will, in the film. Like, was this a conscious choice, or was this just a reflection of Vandana Shiva's work?
No, it was definitely what made her very appealing to me as a conduit for the issues, because she is an ecofeminist and she's a woman standing up to corporate power. And, you know, sort of even the Industrial Revolution was a sort of a patriarchal construct. So that whole narrative really resonated with me as a feminist. I think I've become an eco-feminist. I didn't really know much about that, but it resonates with me now. And so I can't remember what your question was specifically, but yes, the fact that she is an eco-feminist was a very strong driver for me to choose her as a subject.
Great. Yeah, I think that answers the question for sure. And just to finish up, as I mentioned before, the film's available to watch tomorrow as part of this film festival, and also will be streamed as part of GLF Nairobi in October. Is there anything that you would like to say to people that for them to keep in their minds as they watch the film, or perhaps to reflect on once they finished watching the film?
Yeah, sure. And if you don't manage, I should just say, if you don't manage to see the film in the film festival for any reason, you can actually rent or buy it through our website, vandanashivamovie.com. It's available on a few, iTunes and Amazon right now. It will be going much broader in the near future after the film festival. So catch it in the film festival first. But it is available through our website, and we've got a very active social media accounts too that people can follow Vandana, what she's doing, and also the work. But I think what I learned from working on this film was to be much more conscious about my purchasing power. You know, if anything, we have power. We can vote with our forks, basically. And so as much as I possibly can, and I know for many communities it's less easy than for others, but I always try and prioritize buy organic, buy from my local farmer, just be conscious about your food choices and your food purchases as much as you possibly can afford. And I will say that it's sometimes tricky because the systems are not to be conspiracy theorists, but the system conspires to make it difficult for us to make ecological choices about everything we buy, especially in cities and what have you. But if you can vote with your fork and put pressure on your local policymakers to prioritize regenerative ecological food systems, support those over the industrial.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
And for people that are interested in finding that website, finding out more, and purchasing or renting the film, there's also a link to that website at the bottom of the film's festival page, so you can get to it via that. And that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really fascinating to learn a bit more about what goes into a film like this more generally, and some of the aspects of this film specifically. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eden. It was lovely to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Ako na kamu, iya kamu, iti kamu na emiyo.
Si cuidamos a ella, ella nos cuida también, nos da alimentos. Si lo utilizamos mal, pues también ella misma nos va a castigar.
I say continue looking at that forest even he died. I'm interested in planting more and more.
Het is die godvergeten mooi. Dus onthoud is één waarheid die we nu leren in deze film. Auw!
What is my passion for the planet? Is my passion planting trees? Is my passion speaking on behalf of other people? What do you think you want to fight for?
No! The science is clear! We need climate justice!
Try to be the change you want to see in the world.
We arrived as individuals with very different stories, but we all shared a dream.
When you control food, you control society. But when you control seed, you control life on Earth.
When you're one step away from success, that's when they want you to think you're the furthest. But you are close. You are close.